Perfect. So this is going to be the first photo that I'm going to kind of be discussing. And I've put the camera settings down at the bottom for you guys to kind of have a look at them. And yeah, so I can explain them better because otherwise I have to go find them. A lot of the time my camera settings are just to balance out with the lights, because when you're using a lot of different lights, it's difficult to balance them all depending if they're not all the same power output. So for instance, the stellar lights are much more powerful, much more. Dave, your English teacher, that was much more correct sentence because that is absolutely atrocious in my head. Yeah, so because it's a lot more powerful, a lot more sounds better, than the 60s, the TL60s that I was using, I had to balance it out with my camera settings. But that being said, with the camera settings, I wanted a shallow depth of field. Now I know with a lot of photography, and I'll show you with other images, that I don't always go with that rule. A lot of people go with the lowest f-stop, like f2.8 or 1.8 or 1.4 or 1.2. But I didn't want like that. That wasn't the main purpose. I wanted that shallow depth of field because I wanted the hair to start blurring in the background, and because I can do this now, which is amazing. And I can pick color. Check. The stream's still good. Yeah, stream's still good. Okay. Now, as you can see in the background, this hair here is out of focus. Also, here on the shoulder, it's out of focus. And you're also getting a little bit of focal fall off here on the cheek, which was kind of the purpose because I wanted to draw more attention to the eye, like so that the eye is more sharp. Now that is normally in portrait photography for sure, but I wanted that focal fall off towards the back because I wanted to get softer so that the lines and the rest of my body isn't as in focus as it would have been if I was shooting at a higher f-stop, which I'll show you an example of later. Now, minimize that. I've also spoken about the lights, and as you can see at the bottom, it's saying how many lights I was using, and I was using 5 lights. Now I know a lot of people don't have access to that, but I was using a 5-light setup for this. So, but we'll get into all the lights and their purposes later. Let's talk a little bit more about the camera setting. The shutter speed is at 160th of a second. Now that's also done on purpose because when you're working with mixed lighting, you have a threshold where your shutter speed starts, what I always say, you get ambient light contamination, and that's what I was looking for. As bad as the word contamination sounds, I was looking for some ambient light contamination. And we'll just make another layer for that and pick a different color. So it's fun. Go with green. So what I mean by that is, as you can see here on the shoulder, and also for the background, I wanted some ambient light contamination. And that is achieved by an f-stop, normally around 100th of a second. The lower you go, the more contamination you get. So this works wonderful when you are like shooting stuff indoors and you've got a lot of ambient light, like incandescent light and stuff like that, and you are trying to get the environment lights working within your photo. And that can be achieved by lowering your shutter speed. It can't be achieved by making your ISO higher or making your f-stop higher or lower or any of that thing. It only gets achieved by playing around with your shutter speed. And when you go to what is flash sync speed, that is when you start eliminating ambient light. So that is why the shutter speed is as low as 160th of a second, which if you had to go with the rule of, double the focal length, I'm breaking the rule there because I was shooting with a 100mm macro at f2.8. And obviously, if you wanted to go with double, then it would have been in 200th of a second. So yeah, everybody catching up so far? Everybody understand the method to my madness? And because I was taking these things in account, obviously I was compensating with the ISO. That's the reason why the ISO is above 1000. It's at 1250th of a second. So, any questions about camera settings and why I chose the camera settings that I did? As you can see, I've got chat open off to the side here. And I've got time to answer as many questions as you guys would like. Okay. I don't see anybody typing, so seems like we're all good, all nice. All right. Okay. So let's talk about the lights, because I think that is what a lot of people want to know is lighting and why I've chosen certain, the lights in this way. It looks very, how can I say, very messy. You have, let's see, I'm going to choose another color because I can. So you've got the lights over here. That's kind of like crisscross, just looks like a mixed mesh. You got this light over here. And you also have two lights here in the background. Now that's a lot of lights for this one image, right? Now there was method to the madness. There is a reason they are set up the way they've been set up. So I'm going to ask, why is that? Any guesses to some of our veteran photographers in the chat? Dave, Kat, any guesses? Kim, Brand? Got some time? Okay, fine. I'll explain. Okay. So we're gonna break this down. I've had a lot of fun today building this whole, illustration, and I'm actually quite excited. So we're gonna start off with the key light. Now the key light is obviously, the main light, and it's the one that is projecting this pattern on her face, and that is this light right over here. Now that is done that way with a projection mount attachment. Now let's show you guys what that is. And I think it is that thing over there. So let me make it bigger. Gee. Put it over here. That is the projection mount attachment that I was using for this image specifically. Okay. And that is the main light that is projecting this pattern that you see here on her face, which was obviously intended. So that is how we get the key light, and that is why we were using that key light. And I was using the Stellar CLX10 because I found it's one of the more powerful video lights that I have, because for this you can do it with flash, but it's a lot more difficult because you can't see where this thing is projecting, because you can only judge where it's projecting every time you take a photo, unless you have a flash that has got a really good continuous light, which most of them suck. So I was using the Stellar CLX10 because it is really powerful and I can get low ISO with it. And that is it there. This is the CLX10. And it's actually become one of my favorite pieces of lighting kit that I own. So, yeah, I was using that, and that is obviously what you can see that is projecting the light, and it's got great battery life, and that is how I achieved this result and got the projection hitting just exactly where I wanted because I didn't want it to affect her eyes. I have a couple of shots where she obviously moves around and it hits the eyes, and you kind of get these like black stripes over the eyes. I don't like that because it kind of takes away that little catch light. So that is the key light. Next up, full light. Now, with full light, there's a lot of different ways you can interpret full light. In this manner, we were using full light for the background because I wanted this really clean white background. We were using some full light in the background, and these are the lights that are doing the filling. This is hitting the background, making that beautiful white abyss that you see there. And again, obviously done with intention because of the rim light that we were adding. So let's check out the rim light. I can't say much about the full light because literally what it's doing is making sure the background's white, which often if you're working with lights in a small space and stuff like that and a projection and all those things, you often get shadows on a background, mainly the shadows of the model standing there. And if the projection is hitting her in a certain angle, it's obviously creating a shadow on the background of the model and the projection because the studio isn't as bright as the lights. So we're using full to make sure to just wash it out. This works wonderful with a white background, not so nice with a black background or color background because if you're pumping out more light than what is kind of needed, or trying to pump out more light than what is from the full light or the key light, then you're gonna sit with maybe a washed out color background or washed out like your black background's gonna go gray. So yeah. Next up, rim light. Any questions so far? I look to my side every now and then. None so far. Cool. Rim light. And the rim light are these lights. Now, the rim light actually is one of the main players in the motivation behind this image that I was creating. And we're going to use the same blue because as we'll switch off key light and full light, just so that the rim light's more apparent. And the rim light was mainly done, I didn't want this hard projection on her. I wanted it to fade out in the same way that it is fading out right here on her shoulder. I wanted it to fade out, kind of as it gets to the corners of her body, that it's not this clean projection there. And also, I wanted a little bit of rim hitting here on the eyes and obviously here on the cheeks. This is also being made by the fill, because obviously when you're pumping out a lot of light on the background, it's obviously spilling to the front. But that is why we're using the rim lights, because I wanted it to create a little bit more of depth to make the model not look so cut out and flat in the image. And that's just one way you can start creating some depth in your images, is by not always adding shadows, but adding light. Cool. Thanks, Jish. Yeah. Took a lot of thought, but I was quite happy with the process here. And this was inspired also by another image that I saw online. So a lot of it's not always coming up with the things yourself. It's actually seeing what other people are doing and seeing how you can create it by yourself. So yeah, the motivation behind this was to get this look and create because often when you see the projection mount being used, it creates a very flat image. And I wanted to figure out a way how I can make this in a brighter environment, because often when you see it, these styles of projection mounts, it's often used in your noir style photo shoot when you see the blinds and stuff like that. So I wanted to create this really beautiful, clean, white studio background look, and I wanted to figure out a way to actually create depth. And I wanted to create depth with more light instead of more shadow. So that was the motivation behind this photo. And composition wise, I'm not even going to lie on this one. We did a couple of shots. As you guys can see, the reference image is not the same as the final image, but obviously the same setup was used. We just changed out the different gobo or cookie to get the different patterns because I preferred this pattern. But we kind of played around, and she was just fixing her hair. I snapped a shot. That's one of the wonders of continuous lights. You just can carry on shooting, and the light will stay the same. And it just so happens to be this one. And I love it because in that moment, we also were getting her chin up a little bit more to give her that longer, slimmer neck, which is very often used in fashion photos. You always want to make the neck nice and slim. And the way you can do that is by asking the model just to raise the chin a little bit. Another good tip is what we were doing is breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth. That parts the lips, makes the lips look fuller, and it doesn't look like she's clenching. So yeah, all the lights used in this image was, like I said, the CL10, and we were also using the tube lights, which has become one of my all-time favorite lights that I own. It's the TL60s from Godox, and you can obviously change them into different RGB colors. So, yeah. And then obviously for you who've missed, that is the CL10. And yeah, that is this image. Any questions before we move on to the next one? Any questions about this image? Anything that you think I've missed or haven't spoken about? Even if you just put in chat, I am good. I'd appreciate that. I'm sure somebody wants a question, and don't feel shy to, ask a question if you have any. It's all about getting some good answers. Cool. Cat's all good. Good, good. Well done. Thanks for explaining. Okay, cool. So we'll move on to the next image. And it would be this one. And you guys won't see it because I first need to change screens again. Change windows. This one, pretend I did it correct earlier. Now, I won't jump into this one just yet because this is a very new one that I've done recently, pretty much the other day. And as you guys can see, it's got some interesting lights in it. So yeah, if you got any questions to go from, otherwise we'll jump right into it. I don't want to rush through everything. That's why I'm asking so much. Cool. Seem to be good. All right, let's talk about. I'm going to talk about motivation on this one first because motivation is always fun for me. Motivation. I really wanted a shot with this beautiful black abyss. The original shot I want actually, and I'm still going to get it, and I'm being honest, is I want the similar look, but model in a white jacket. And the reason we were going for the shot, this is the one I picked out of all the looks, is she's not obviously not wearing, as you can see, a top underneath. She's literally just wearing the jacket, no bra, nothing else, because I wanted like a really cool shot, and I'll still edit it. She's holding it like this, so you can see the abs, you can see everything, you can see all the hard work from the athlete, and I think it just looks very cool. So, the motivation behind it is I really wanted this awesome stadium look, which you get with stadium looking lights, which everybody knows when they look at a stadium is these big balls of light that is in the background.
So that was the motivation behind it. I really wanted this proper sporty stadium look, and I was quite happy with that. Next up, camera settings. Again, f2.8. That was chosen for a reason, because if the f-stop was too high, the balls of light would not be balls of light. They would be they would be the cylindrical hard edges. If I wanted to soften it, I wanted to make sure it's blurring out in the background, that it's actually bokeh. So I chose f2.8, and obviously as you can see, she's pretty close to the lights, because I also wanted to use them as a rim light to hit the shoulders to make sure that it's kind of wrapping around her. So I made sure she was like very close to the light. So I had to use a low aperture. Shutter speed, it was at 320th of a second, just mainly to balance out all the other lights. This has not got any need for ambient light like the previous photo, because obviously it doesn't need it. And it was just to balance out the light, the same with the ISO. There's no rhyme or reason behind that. That was just to balance out the different power outputs from the lights behind her and the lights in front of her. So that is the reason for the camera settings. And then this was a 4-light setup, and mainly for 2 rim lights, one full and one key light. So we'll jump into which is what and all of that. Let's just do this again and close all of these things down, because I'll speak about them. All right. So, motivations, key light. Key light's right up there. Now that, again, was the CL10. I like using that light a lot, especially when you're working in these situations where you kind of need to see it. And the reason I need to see it is because I don't really think so. Like why I need to see it. I think it's mainly I used a video light or constant light, because I was using constant lights for the balls of light in the background, so that I can see they were on. Because sometimes the flash is too powerful. But I'm not going to get into why that is, because of it's got to do with the modifiers. If the powers of the light's too strong, it could cause issues with the look of the image. So we're using the CL10, which again is this one over here. And the reason for that is I was using a Fresnel, which is this thing. Let me move it so you can see better. So this is called a Fresnel. Now this is one of my all-time favorite modifiers. And the reason for it is to get this glow of light that's not spilling over onto the background. Let's use the brush. I haven't done that in a bit. We'll use the brush, and I'll change the color of it to red. We're working with the full light. And as you can see, is this one. As you can see, it's not affecting any of the lower area. And that is because the Fresnel is projecting a ball of light, and that is what a Fresnel does. It focuses light in a parabolic shape, and that's also the reason a parabolic is called a parabolic. But a Fresnel does it in a different way. It's got to do with the way the edges of the glass is being cut and how it focuses light. So instead of like a modifier that would, and man, I love talking about lights, apparently. So the way a modifier works is it will be in this shape, and the light will come in from the inside. There's normally a diffuser in the middle and another diffuser at the end. And the diffuser in the middle is called a baffler, and it often has a very it's got a thicker center than the outside, because the light is generally coming in from the center. It's coming in this way. Right. That makes sense. And the way that normally works, and we're going to change colors here just to illustrate the light pattern. And the way that normally works is the light is coming in from the center, it's hitting this diffuser, and then it's bouncing all around here. And it's got no rhyme or reason to the direction. It's basically just, what it's doing is diffusing the light. It's unfocusing the light. So when it hits out, it goes out in pretty much all directions. It's going out in this whole shape. And that is kind of what a diffuser does. It diffuses light and then it just balls it out. And the reason I was using a Fresnel is that that effect doesn't happen because I didn't want it to spill onto the background. And I didn't want it to spill onto the rest of the body. I wanted to focus the light, creating a nice hot spot in the center, making sure the brightest part is the center of the face. Now, to make it easier, I will illustrate what a Fresnel does. And the Fresnel is, I'm going to draw it out as a square because it generally is a square. And the light goes in, and it also bounces around like crazy because light has no rhyme or reason. It flows like water. And then there's a glass element in front. And this element often has ridges. So as you can see, do you see the ridges on over there? Elements often have ridges. And this light that's spreading similar to what a softbox does, instead of going out, it is focusing out in a straight channel. Now, for the interesting bit, what's cool about Fresnel, it's got a form of focusing and defocusing. So you can adjust the distance that the Fresnel is from the light. So you can move it backwards and forwards. So you can change from a narrow beam to a slightly wider beam, which often creates a little bit, it will most often have a very, very strong hotspot in the center and diffuse out to the corners. Thanks, Siri. So it will spread out softer in the corners, but you can control the amount of spread with a Fresnel. And that was a very, very, very long explanation of a Fresnel. But that is our full light. Or no, that was our key light. That's the main light that we're using. All right, next up is full, which is that little one down there, which is a very, very simple one. It was just same thing. And I think one of the questions from here is going to be, if you're using a full light, why didn't you get something that spreads? Again, I didn't want it to hit the background. So we're using a full light just to kind of get into the shadows so she doesn't completely disappear, because it's got a very hot spot in the, like, on her face. And then obviously because she's wearing a black jacket and all of that, it's very dark. So we're using the full light just to kind of lift the shadows a little bit. So you can still see detail, but it's not the same brightness as the whole image or the whole person in image. So that is the full. The little TL60 just beaming up right there. Any questions? I've rambled a lot. Any questions so far? We're good. If you have questions, interrupt me. Otherwise, you'll never get answers. You got to interrupt me. All good? That's all good. Great. I explained really well then, apparently. Okay. Next up, the room lights, which is obvious. It's very obvious. It's the balls of light that you see in the background. And they work very similar to your normal strip boxes. The effect. The only difference is we're using them in a method that is called practical lighting. And by that, I mean it's lights being used in an image as decoration, practical lights. And because they're practical, you don't have to hide them. And you can get the same room light. I don't have to add a room light in now. So it's not much to say about them. Like I said, they work as a set, like a general room light. They're just there for also the cool effect that you see in the image. Make sense? Cool. Happy days. Okay. Something to drink. Surprised. I thought Dave was going to ask questions about these boxes, but I think he asked the other day. So, so yeah. Before we move on to the next image. Any questions about this image? I've got questions about this image, things I'm not happy about. And don't let the question be what my question is. Cat, I can see it already. Don't let that question be what am I unhappy about the image. Be original, people. Be original. Okay, someone's typing. Okay. Okay, no worries. Then ask on your account. Jesh, we good? Brent, we good? Kim, we good? Zahid, we good? Cool. So I don't want to jump to the next image if somebody has questions about the image. This is me kind of doing a bit of a breakdown for you guys. Cool, good, good. Sure, Brent's good as well. Cool. Dave has some questions he can ask them. And I can always jump back if he has any questions. All right. Let me change up. Change up this screen again. Window. Here we go. Well, this is the last one. You guys have not had a lot of questions, so we are flowing through this quite nicely. Nice. Okay. Super, super happy with this one. And the reason I picked this one is the last live we did with editing wise, a lot of people asked about how did I light this one. So now you can see how I lit this one. Got video footage that I used and I took a screenshot of it. So now you can see how this image was lit. Which is kind of interesting, eh? When you look at the video or the screenshot, it looks very bright. Obviously wasn't exposed for that moment. And she's also wearing a shoe. All right. 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I was correct. 5 lights. Yep. It's much brighter because obviously I was working on taking a photo and the video was just kind of just to roll some behind the scenes. But honestly, that's normally how an image looks. When you're looking at it from the natural eye, this was exposed for the room. So when you're looking at it from the natural eye, it's very bright, you know. We don't always see that because we use flash often. And when we use flash, it obviously it's a very short burst and nobody notices. So, camera settings. Remember I told you guys I was going to talk about apertures not being as low as they normally have to be? This is one of those points. This aperture is f4 because I obviously wanted more in focus. I see Rand's typing. Let's have a look what he has to ask. I love questions. Really, I do. Love the mood you create. Yeah, exactly. We'll talk about the motivation because that's what the mood is, the motivation. So, let's talk about some of the motivation. The idea behind this is called 1950s Hollywood glam. Now, this is kind of where I fell in love with it for now. And why I actually use it so often. It's from the 1950s. In the 1950s, if you look back at photography back then, there were no modifiers or lights back then, right? And I have spoken about this on a past live. And when you look at how they had to kind of adapt back in the day with lighting and stuff like that, the Fresnel was the only choice they had if they wanted to use, some artificial lighting that's not, natural light. Even painters back in the day used to put their canvases um, close to a window, and they used, obviously the natural light coming in from the window to paint the people. So when photographers started using, artificial lighting, they didn't have a lot of choices. The options were very, very slim. And the only light that was available was stage lights. And stage lights used Fresnels, or they used bare bulbs. And the Fresnel actually comes from a lighthouse, which, is one of my all-time fun facts, and I'm sure there's a lot of laughter happening at right now. But yeah, it comes from the lighthouse. It is designed to beam a light through fog. And they noticed, well, it's also great for lighting a stage, making sure that the main person on stage is, being isolated. So the main way to get that old Hollywood look was to use a Fresnel. I cool. Thought it was a message. All right. Okay. The main way to get the old Hollywood look was by using a Fresnel in the image. And the reason for that is you get this, similar to what I showed earlier, this beautiful ball of light on the face, which is also, I can't zoom in, but if you want to look at the image more, close up and stuff like that, it is also on my social media. And it creates very harsh shadows because it's very much a focused beam of light. There's no softening happening from it. It's focusing a beam of light, and then it's creating this softening effect out to the ridges. But the main light is hard. So that is our key light. Skip through a lot of things, but that is the key light. So the whole idea behind the shoot was recreating an old Hollywood glamour photo shoot. And a lot of choices in this image, reflected that. The background color. Background color was picked specifically for this because they don't when they were shooting, they often used, there were wooden floors, wooden stuff around. It was a very warm aesthetic. And also, like, if it was in color at all, most of the time it was black and white. But I wanted a warmer aesthetic because, you know, if you look at like really old like Hollywood images, they've got like a nice warm aesthetic to it. They often use like a, golden background, for the Golden Globes and stuff like that. They often used like yellows and reds and stuff like that. So I chose this brown background. And then also we chose 3 dresses. Now that is one of my like all-time like list of things to do when you're doing photo shoots is make sure that your model at least packs 3 different outfits, so when you're taking photos they don't look like they're all taken from the same day. But the model's outfits I chose were very neutral in color. We had a green, a beige, and the red. Those were 3 choices. This was the red. It was obviously my favorite, or the images that I got from it was my favorite. But the choices were also very neutral in the sense wasn't, looked like normal streetwear you see today. We made sure that it fitted the aesthetic. That is the mood. And the camera settings, obviously, as well, play in with the mood. Now, we were using an f4 specifically because lenses back then weren't as low. Well, there were a few, but it was very rare. But I also I didn't want that shallow depth of field. Why did I need it? If I wanted to make sure the model was sharply in focus, I didn't want that shallow depth of field because we're shooting in studio. What does it matter? I show the background. The background is either I'm controlling that with light or it is a plain backdrop. So why worry about having f1.2? I was shooting with the 70-200, and that thing has a f2.8. Didn't need it. And most often when it comes to lenses, you'll find that lenses actually have a sweet spot of sharpness. When you go too low, yeah, it's got sharpness, but it isn't as sharp as you would find it on a higher f-stop, which logically makes sense, but in the way the manufacturing works is where it's supposed to be sharp, it isn't as sharp as it would have been at a higher f-stop, even if you looked at the shallow depth of field. And the same if you go up to a higher f-stop. If you let's say, go to f2.2, you'll see vignetting, chromatic aberrations, and still focal fall off around the corners. There's a sweet spot in most lenses, and most often you will find them around f5.6, f4 to up till I would say f11. Those would be your sweet spot of where your where your lens is actually working at its full capability of sharpness and focusing. So, not really the point here, but that is why I here like to use the aperture f4. I didn't need the background to be shallow. I just wanted to make sure she was properly in focus and there was no heavy focal fall off happening to the back of her on her shoulders or to the hair. Shutter speed was just to balance out all the different lighting aesthetics, which we'll speak about when we talk about the lights. And the ISO, same. Because we're using a lot of lights, we could go down to 400. And because we didn't care about ambient contamination at 400th of a second, we could have had that ISO down even lower if we lowered our shutter speed, but we didn't want some ambient contamination this time. We didn't want the light to wrap around the model, or the light that's, if you're not familiar, the light that's maybe spilling over to the ceiling, hitting the model. All those things you keep in account. Okay, so we are going to work with the way I normally say is a great way to actually work in an image. We're going to work from the back to the front on this one. And the reason I'm saying that is because I put a lot of brain power into this image. So we're going to work from the background. Background is what we call a hybrid Fresnel. I don't have an image of that thing because they're fairly new and they're fairly newly designed. I think they're about 2 years old. And the reason we say we work with the background is we work with the areas of light that we can step up. So we're going to work with the background because then when we start adding the other lights, we'll notice if the background gets affected and the model gets affected. So if the model's not being affected by the background light, perfect. If the background gets affected by the model light, we'll manage that. So background light. The background light is, switch all this stuff off. The background light is, surprise, surprise this time, the CL10. It's not my main light, even though I love it, but it's not my main light. I'm using that just as a continuous one, hitting the background to create that ball of light glow that you see that's just around her hips. And I'm just controlling that. And none of it is spilling over to the front. Next up, how I would work it is the rim light, which are these tube lights. And they were very important to me, and they were also set, even though you can't tell because obviously when a light is that bright, it's whited out, but they are set to a Kelvin that is much warmer, which if I remember correctly, at about 4,800 Kelvin, around about 4,200 or 4,800 Kelvin. I made it warmer because back then, when we were shooting, the Hollywood glam looks, you wouldn't often find, these beautiful, neutral white, daylight lights out there that are like 5,600 Kelvin. So, but as well, I wanted a warmer aesthetic in the photo. And if I can manage the photo without having to do a lot of Photoshop, if I can do that, I've got the tools at my disposal, I'm going to use it. It's always great to have a fantastic base and then, improve it in Photoshop and not have to take an okay image and make it great. Take a great image and make it fantastic. So the room lights are 4,200 to 4,800 Kelvin, and it's creating that beautiful glow that you're seeing on her shoulders. And because we can draw, I'll add that in. Still going to use red. And you'll see them over here. You'll see it kind of hitting the hair. And because we were using the Fresnel, the ball of light is not affecting her hair a lot. So we're getting even nicer rim light hitting her hair. So it's even creating that, because you're getting that, what I would say is a bit of a fall off, or the, like the feathering out of the ball of light. It's still creating some shape, but now with the rim light also hitting it from the back, you're even getting some more shape, and it's kind of like bleeding over towards the front. So we'll switch this off because you could probably not tell with all that drawing. You'll see there's still detail in the shadows, but it's not overpowering. She's really nicely isolated from the background, that darkness there. So yeah, that is the room light. Next up, I would use the key light, because I didn't know at this point in time that it would have been too dark, which is that one. And that one, this time, because we're talking about a different one, it's still a stellar, but it is this one, which is called the Reflex. Now, what's awesome about this one is it is both a flash and a continuous light. So what's nice about this, because it's such a powerful flash and such a powerful continuous light, I can keep the modeling light on, and I can see where the light's hitting. So I can make sure that when she's moving, because we're focusing the light in such a small column, in such a small ball, I can move the light around to hit her face, so that it's not, when she moves out, that her face is not in shadow, because I wanted that, Rembrandt lighting that you see on her cheek over there. I wanted to make sure that the light is hitting the face, but not flattening the face. I see some people are typing, so we're not gonna. We'll give them a moment. I have to jump off. Thanks for the show. Cool. No worries. Yes, Kim, that is the one we spoke of the other day. And Zaid, thanks for making it. It was awesome having you here. Yeah, we spoke about this light the other day. It is, both the flash and the continuous light. It's quite nice. And it puts out the same amount of power as the 8200. So it's not heavy at all. It fits quite like comfortably in the hand, to be quite honest. It's literally, if you look probably at my video, most difficult, it's, I would say, about this big. It's very nice. It's very small. You can even see it in the demo photo at the top there. It's very, very tiny. The modifier is bigger than the actual light. So yeah. But that is the full light. And what I liked about it in this photo, I was still using the flash, but I used the continuous light to maneuver it. And the reason I was using mixed lighting is mainly I wanted more power output from it, because I'm using the CL10 in the background. I wanted more power from the reflex. It's not as powerful as the CL10. Its flash is more powerful, and we're even using it in high-speed sync. It's even more powerful than what you would do if you were shooting below 250th a second, or whatever your flashing speed is. Cool. That is the main light. And we were obviously, like I said, using the Fresnel, which I explained earlier. It is the same light, and this time we were focusing the beam more out, so we were getting less feather. So as you can see, there's kind of like a screw path towards the back, and you can kind of feather it in and out by using, screwing it further closer to the light or further away. We were obviously more further out to make sure the light's a lot more focused and just kind of hitting the chest. Then I realized, well, she's sitting in this very nice, fashion, and the original image was very dark below. You didn't see her legs well enough. And you also didn't see a lot of the dress. You literally just saw the face and the highlights, and the room light hitting the head. So I was like, and the glow in the background. I thought to myself, well, you're not seeing what the glow is kind of like supposed to be separating. It's just this dark figure. So we added the fill light, which is the green arrow you see over there. So, and as you can see, also the fill light, the other one I showed you earlier, the fill light was kind of horizontal because I don't want as much fill. But I used the fill light in this method in a more upright column style effort because I wanted it to go closer, but not all the way to the top, closer to her face, but also go down the leg. If it was in a horizontal way, you wouldn't have gotten the same effect. It would have lit up the leg. And also, if it was horizontal, the light would have bled over. As you can see, there's a lot more shadow still in the back, in the front of the leg here. Where is the drawing? Let me switch that on. As you can see, there's still a lot more shadow over here. There you go. And if I had the light, bring on the camera settings again. If I put the light in a horizontal way, obviously the shadow would be less because it would have been a larger light surface in that manner. So that is the setup. 5 lights. Yeah, 5 lights to get this image. Any questions? This was the final image. Any questions about this image? Any questions about any of the stuff? You want me to go back to some of the previous ones? Any thoughts? If you want to ask about camera equipment, if you want to ask about lighting equipment, go ahead. Now is your time. Cool. Everybody happy? Okay, cat's typing. Jesh, you good? I know Dave can't talk. Ryan, you good? Kim, we good? Any questions? There's more than. It's no bad questions here. Either that or I explained really good. Cool. All good. Everybody, could you use? I've used the booty dish instead of the Fresnel to achieve a similar look. Okay. A smaller beauty dish, possibly with a honeycomb grid, but you won't get exactly the same look because the way a beauty dish is designed, specifically, it has the reflector dish in the center. And the reason for that is when the light hits into the beauty dish, and then it will reflect out onto the rest of the beauty dish and then spill all over the show and then spread out. And the design behind the beauty dish is to soften that focused ball of light, which you would get a similar look, and a beauty dish was often used in this similar lighting style, but you won't get it exactly the same because the iconic hotspot, as you would call it, won't be there. And that is the same thing with when I was speaking about the baffler that you get in a softbox. It often has a thicker centerpiece, and that is to um, lessen a hotspot coming in from a flash. Because if you look at how lights work, they've got a very focused beam of light that is projecting out. And that's why we use a diffuser is to diffuse that. And most often, if you got a lower grade modifier, they don't have that central baffler with the central thicker piece that is just controlling the excess central amount of light because the rest is getting reflected. So you could get a similar look, but it won't be exactly the same because you don't have that hotspot, which you can see here on her cheek. There's a part of her face that has got a lot more light. Hope that answered the question. No, Godox actually makes the Fresnel. If there's the question is there a Godox attachment that can create a similar look? So I have a video on my Instagram if you want to check it out, where I actually run down 3 different modifiers to get these to get the Hollywood glam look. It's a little short video. It's also on my YouTube channel. Godox has they recently came out with their own Fresnel that you can buy at camera stuff. I do recommend in a certain way uh, to just check out the different Fresnels that there are. Not all Fresnels that are being sold are the same. Maybe just do some reading. But I have seen the Godox ones. They've got 2 different ones. They've got a large one and they've got a smaller one. And then the big difference is obviously the size of the light that you can use it with and the size of the ball of light. I personally would prefer the smaller one because, most often as photographers, we are not too worried about the overall, how can I say, look of the image, because we can Photoshop stands and stuff like that out if we need to. The bigger one is mainly for video lights when you actually have to get the light away further from the model. So obviously distance would affect the amount of spread. So Godox has 2 options. You can also achieve a very similar look with the projection attachment that I was talking about earlier, which is, let's see, I think it's that one. No, not that one. That one. This one. Again, cost-wise, I wouldn't say this is the most effective. The Fresnel is cheaper, but you can get a very similar look with the projection attachment because it works in a very similar way. It is about focusing a light. Now, something that I didn't explain in the previous one, and we'll jump quickly back to that one. We'll talk there. Let's see. Jump back to that one. Switch these out. I think what's the name? 07, yeah. That one. Go. Okay. With the projection attachment, let me switch on that layer. With the projection attachment, that one, you can focus the harshness of the shadow, or not the harshness, the sharpness of the shadow with the projection attachment. So it works very similar in the Fresnel, and then with the way I was saying that when you zoom it in and out, you control the amount of softness of the spread. The focused beam of light will stay the same, but you control the amount of softness it spreads out to. Similar, you can create that similar look with this, and if you use this projection attachment, you can also control the focus of the shadows that you see on her face. You can make them a little bit softer if you don't want these edges so hard or pronounced. That's a very fun little thing that you can do with that. As far as modifiers go, the top 3 I'd say is a projection attachment, the Fresnel, and a beauty dish. If you are trying to achieve the Hollywood glam look. Cool. I'll go back to the Hollywood glam image, seeing as that we were on that one. Pleasure. I'm glad I could be of assistance. Any other questions? Lighting, camera settings, anything else I can help with before we end this off? Because we have reached the end. Actually, better question. While you guys think of some questions, did you guys enjoy this format? Should I do more of this? Is there any notes that you can add for future versions of this? Because a lot of the previous questions when you do live editing is people were very interested in how I got the shot. Is there anything I missed? Anything that you guys would prefer, me to add or go over, or the way this thing was flowed? All right, next time what I'll do is I'll add the raw image so you guys can see the before and after. Obviously, the edited image has some form of manipulation on it, but definitely I'll take that note and we'll do the raw image as a comparison. Perfect. Any other questions to end off? Kat, Rand, Jesh, Kim? If you guys are good, just let me know and we can end this off. Perfect. Kim's good. Rand's good. Jesh would like a live shoot. I was thinking about that just before I started this live. I promise it a lot. Okay. Let me work on it. Let me work on it. Live shoot. But awesome. If everybody's happy, nice to have some background info from Kat. Perfect. Awesome, guys. Thank you so much for joining. This was lovely. Thank you for coming out, watching some of this. We will do this more often. And I'll take you guys' notes in consideration. Pleasure, guys. Hope you guys have a wonderful evening further. And yeah, that is going to be it for me for tonight, guys. Cheers.